Oh, oh, oh.
In the vast, sprawling narrative of David Chase's The Sopranos, certain scenes operate not merely as plot progression, but as tectonic shifts in the landscape of the show's universe.
Look at you, fucking Ken. You look great. You're all sinew.
You suck as shit.
They are the moments where the subtext of the series, the rot of the American dream, the toxicity of masculine pride, the crushing weight of heritage, breaks the surface tension of casual dialogue. One such moment occurs in the second season, outside the pork store, under the gray, indifferent sky of North Jersey. It is the moment Richie, freshly released from a decade in prison, confronts Christopher Moltisanti about domestic abuse.
Hey, I said 4 o'clock.
The fuck? I leave before the stock market closes. You scream at me for not watching the phone, guys.
Meet Richie Aprile.
On the surface, it is a dispute about a niece's honor. Beneath the veneer of old-school chivalry, however, lies a complex, terrifying map of the season's central conflict, the collision between a calcified, violent past and a pragmatic, business-oriented present. To understand the weight of this scene, one must first understand the entity that is Richie. Played with a coiled, serpentine menace by David Proval, Richie is not just a character, he is an artifact. He steps out of prison and into the year 2000, but his mind, his mannerisms, and his moral code are fossilized in 1990, a reminder of a time when the mob was perhaps less corporate, but significantly more feral. The setting is crucial. The sidewalk table is a space of leisure, a court where the King Tony holds casual audience. By marching into this space with aggressive intent, Richie commits his first, subtle act of insurrection. He does not wait to be invited. He does not pay homage to the boss first. He targets the weakest link in the chain, Christopher, and in doing so, challenges the strength of the entire chain.
Jesus Christ, how you doing? I gotta tell you, your brother Jackie was like a fucking god, and I heard a lot about you.
Yeah, well, I heard a lot about you. That's why I'm here.
Richie's grievance is that Christopher has laid hands on Richie's niece. In any other context, an uncle defending his niece from an abusive boyfriend would be a moment of moral clarity. However, The Sopranos relentlessly strips away the romance of the mafia to reveal the hypocrisy underneath.
What do you mean?
Out of respect for our friend here, I'm gonna talk nice. I ever hear you raise your hands to my niece again, next time you won't see my face. You understand?
Richie's defense of Adriana is not rooted in a belief in the sanctity of women or a modern understanding of domestic violence. It is rooted in property rights. His chilling ultimatum to Christopher, "You want to raise your hands, you give her your last name," is the scene's thematic anchor.
Who told you I put my hand on her?
Look, kid, I shouldn't have to explain myself. I'm from the old school. You want to raise your hands, you give her your last name. Until then, keep your hands in your pockets. We understand each other?
It is a perfect encapsulation of the old-school mentality Richie fetishizes. He is not forbidding violence, he is regulating it. He is establishing a bureaucracy of abuse. In Richie's worldview, a wife is a possession that a man has earned, the right to discipline, whereas a girlfriend is still under the protection of her blood patriarchs. By hitting Adriana before marrying her, Christopher hasn't just hurt a woman, he has vandalized Richie's property and insulted his family brand. This distinction is vital because it exposes Richie's code as a fraud. He wraps his ego in the flag of family honor. He uses the old-school label to justify his sadism, positioning himself as a man of principle in a world that has gone soft. But the viewer sees the truth. Richie is simply a bully looking for a pretext to exert dominance. He needs to feel like the formidable capo he was 10 years ago, and shrinking Christopher down to size is the quickest way to achieve that dopamine hit of power.
Now get out of here. I want to talk to Tony.
If Richie is the ghost of the past, Christopher Moltisanti is the confused, flailing child of the present. This scene underscores the central tragedy of Christopher's existence, his perpetual infantilization. Despite his ambitions,
Who told you I put my hand on her?
his arc,
What do you mean?
and his desire to be a made man in every sense of the word,
And I heard a lot about you.
Christopher is constantly reduced to a schoolboy being scolded by his elders. This is a man who has hijacked trucks, committed murders, and engaged in gunfights, yet in the face of Richie's specific brand of crazy, he reverts to a sullen, terrified teenager. Christopher's silence is deafening. He looks to Tony for salvation, a nonverbal plea for his father to step in and drive the monster away. This reliance on Tony weakens Christopher's standing even further.
What do you mean?
In the Mafia Code, a man fights his own battles. By failing to stand up to Richie, by failing to articulate a defense or a counter-threat, Christopher proves Richie's point. He is not ready, he is loose, he is undisciplined, and he lacks the gravitas of the generation that preceded him. Richie attacks Christopher not just for the act of violence against Adriana, but for what Christopher represents, the unearned entitlement of the new generation. To Richie, who did his time and kept his mouth shut, Christopher is a sovereign who has been handed everything on a silver platter because of his nepotistic connection to Tony. Richie sees the lack of sinew, the baby fat, and it disgusts him. This confrontation is Richie hazing the pledge, testing the mettle of the young upstart and finding it wanting. Furthermore, Christopher's inability to protect himself here foreshadows his ultimate fate. He is caught between two abusive father figures, Tony, who uses him as a tool, and Richie, who sees him as a target.
Meet Richie Aprile.
Out of respect for our friend here, I'm gonna talk nice.
He tries to navigate these waters by numbing himself later with heroin, and by acting out in other arenas, screenwriting. But in the raw, primal confrontation of the street, he is defenseless. He is a boy playing dress-up in a gangster's suit,
And Richie sees right through the costume.
At the center of this storm sits Tony Soprano. A lesser show would have had the boss immediately intervene, asserting his authority to stop the squabbling of his subordinates. But the Sopranos is interested in the darker, more realistic mechanics of power.
That's why I'm here.
Tony's inaction is an action. His silence is a weapon. Why does Tony let Richie humiliate his nephew? There are layers to this calculation. First, there is the issue of legitimacy.
Richie is the brother of Jackie,
The former acting boss and Tony's best friend. Richie is mafia royalty. He has status that even Tony cannot easily disregard. To dress down Richie publicly, immediately after his release from prison, would be a violation of protocol. It would signal insecurity on Tony's part. A secure king does not need to bark at every dog that snaps. By sitting back, Tony displays a terrifying confidence. I am so powerful I can finish my espresso while you threaten murder.
I ever hear you raise your hands to my niece again.
Second, Tony is gathering intelligence. He has not seen Richie in operation for a decade. He needs to know what version of Richie has returned. Is he broken? Is he reformed? Or is he, as this scene proves, the same sociopath he always was? Tony watches Richie's body language, his eyes, his fluctuating temper. He is building a mental dossier on a potential rival. He is letting Richie show his hand. And Richie, in his arrogance, reveals everything: his volatility, his disrespect for boundaries, and his hunger for control.
Who told you I put my hand on her?
Is this kid getting jerky with me?
Third, there is a pedagogical aspect regarding Christopher. Tony often employs a sink or swim method of mentorship. He may feel that Christopher needs to be scared, that he needs to be reminded of the brutal consequences of his erratic behavior. By letting Richie menace him, Tony is outsourcing his discipline. He lets Richie be the bad cop, allowing the message straighten up to land without Tony having to be the one to deliver the blow. However, there is a limit. Tony's passivity is a gamble. If he waits too long, he looks weak. If he lets Richie assert too much dominance, the center of gravity in the family shifts. The tension in the scene comes from the viewer waiting for Tony's line in the sand. When does the old-school respect curdle into present-day insubordination? Tony knows that Richie is testing the fences. Richie is marking territory. He is acting as if he has the authority to police the family's soldiers without consulting the administration. This is a direct challenge to Tony's vertical integration of power. In Tony's modern mob, orders flow down, discipline flows down. Freelancers like Richie, who operate on lateral vendettas, are dangerous. They are cancer cells in the organizational body. Tony sees this immediately. The look in his eyes isn't just annoyance, it's the recognition of a problem that will eventually have to be solved.
Tony, however, does find a way to establish his role as the true boss of the family.
Look, Tom, I want to get my shy business back on its feet. I keep getting these calls from my brother Jackie's customers.
Tony's reaction is a masterclass in soft power. He does not yell. He does not debate Richie on the merits of his old-school code. Instead, he checks his watch. He engages in a brief, dismissive exchange about business, and then he physically removes himself from Richie's orbit.
Where the fuck are you going?
I'll talk to you later, Richie.
We're talking business with the skipper directly.
Are you fucking with me?
By leaving the table to confer with Silvio, Tony reduces Richie to an irrelevance. In the visual language of the scene, the frame shifts from the volatile triad of Tony, Richie, Christopher to the private, executive duo of Tony and Silvio. Richie is left sitting at the kids' table, quite literally left behind in the background while the adults conduct the real business of the family. This gesture shatters Richie's facade. Richie tried to project the image of a powerful elder statesman returning to restore order. Tony's walkaway reframes him as a nuisance, a noisy guest who has interrupted the workflow. It signals to everyone present, including the shaken Christopher, where the true center of gravity lies. Power does not reside in the man who barks the loudest. It resides in the man who decides when the conversation is over. Furthermore, leaving Richie with Christopher after the scolding is a subtle insult. A respected peer would be invited to walk with the boss. By abandoning Richie at the table, Tony forces him to linger in the awkward silence of his own making. The air goes out of Richie's performance immediately. He is no longer the terrifying enforcer. He is just a man sitting on a sidewalk, watching the real power walk away from him. In this silence, Tony Soprano wins the battle without ever drawing his sword.
Silvio's intervention saves Tony from having to get his hands dirty, preserving the boss's aloof mystique, but it also serves as a warning to Richie. It tells him that the old school he reveres also had rules about hierarchy and venue rules Richie is currently breaking. It highlights Richie's hypocrisy again. He claims to love the rules, but he breaks them the moment they inconvenience his rage.
This scene is the prologue of the tragedy of Richie.
It establishes the dynamic that will spiral out of control in the subsequent episodes. We see here that Richie is incapable of reading the room. He lacks social intelligence, a trait Tony possesses in abundance. Richie operates on a binary frequency, dominance or submission. He cannot conceive of cooperation or compromise. This rigidity is what leads to the saga of the jacket.
It's the jacket!
The jacket.
Richie sees the jacket as a symbol of his history, his toughness, a relic of a legendary feat of strength. He expects Tony to revere it. Tony, however, sees it for what it is, a dusty, ugly piece of used clothing from a dead era.
The jacket. I took off Rocco DeMeo.
Oh, yeah.
When Tony gives the jacket to his maid's husband, it is the ultimate rejection of Richie's old-school currency.
Liliana, the remote is down there somewhere, too. It's on the shelves.
Thank you for TV.
The seeds of that rejection are sown here at the cafe table. Tony looks at Richie and sees a man who doesn't fit. He sees a man who stops the flow of money and brings only headaches, agita. In the modern mafia that Tony is trying to build, one that interfaces with construction unions, HUD scams, and stock manipulations, Richie is a liability. Richie is a street thug in a boardroom world. The visual language of the scene reinforces this alienation. The camera lingers on Richie's eyes, the Manson lamps. They are dead, flat, devoid of empathy. Contrast this with the expressive, often pained eyes of Tony Soprano. Tony is a monster, yes, but a human one, capable of guilt, panic, and depression. Richie is something else entirely, a shark in human skin. The show uses this scene to tell us that there is no reasoning with Richie. There is no negotiating with a man who looks at the world and sees only things to be broken or owned. Zooming out, this scene serves as a sociological commentary on the decline of the Italian-American mafia. Richie represents the glory days, the era of the 70s and 80s. His return is supposed to herald a strengthening of the family. Instead, it exposes its fractures. The old school is revealed to be a myth. Richie, the avatar of that era, is petty, insecure, and greedy. He doesn't care about the family, he cares about his cut. He doesn't care about honor, he cares about respect. The clash between him and the new school, Tony, Chris, Silvio, isn't a clash between good and evil, or even order and chaos. It is a clash between two different styles of decay. Richie's generation solved problems with a baseball bat. Tony's generation prefers to solve them with a sit-down, or a payoff, or a therapy session. When Richie brings the baseball bat mentality to the coffee table, it feels anachronistic. It feels embarrassing. It highlights how the mob has become a parody of itself. A group of men cosplaying as soldiers while worrying about their stock portfolios and their Prozac prescriptions. Richie is the uncomfortable truth Tony is trying to ignore, that at the bottom of all their schemes and business ventures, they are just thugs. Richie strips away the pretension. He is the eye to the organization, and Tony hates him for it, because Tony spends his entire life trying to convince himself, and Dr. Melfi, that he is more than just a thug. In 3 minutes of screen time, The Sopranos establishes the stakes for the entire season. We learn that Christopher is weak and in need of protection. We learn that Tony is cautious, calculating, and dangerously patient. And we learn that Richie is a force of nature that cannot be contained, only destroyed. The scene is a tragedy in miniature. We see the inevitability of the violence to come. We know, watching Richie squeeze Christopher's face, that this man will not survive in Tony Soprano's world. He is a relic, a landmine left over from a previous war, waiting to be stepped on. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the scene is what it says about the cycle of abuse. Richie abuses Christopher, Christopher abuses Adriana. Tony abuses everyone. The old-school code Richie preaches is just a mechanism to perpetuate this cycle, to give it a fancy name and a set of rules. When Richie tells Christopher to give Adriana his last name before hitting her, he isn't offering advice, he is offering a prophecy. He is telling Christopher that to be a man in their world is to own your violence, to legalize your cruelty. It is a lesson Christopher takes to heart, with tragic consequences for Adriana, and ultimately, for himself. The scene ends, but the tension remains. The sky is still gray, the coffee is still cold, and the ghost of the past is sitting at the table, waiting for the future to make a mistake,